Okay, this is another of the reports from the Bezos Earth Fund, the Amazon guy, Jeff Bezos. And this is kind of a follow up on what fundings were given and what they represent in general in terms of their dream of moving ahead with these grand challenge initiatives in AI for climate and nature. So we got a good background on what the climate and nature and AI landscape is like in the previous set of podcasts. I will read the executive summary here. The frog in my throat just doesn't go away. But we'll add a few more points from the main text as well. Addressing the climate and nature crises required rapid action and I'm already a bit groggy. Rapid action and scalable solutions. Tools from artificial intelligence, while no silver bullet, can play a potentially impact role in accelerating progress through applications such as optimizing the energy efficiency of heating and cooling systems in the buildings, monitoring species distribution with computer vision, or downscaling climate models to provide localized climate predictions. So we looked at a bunch of these applications already. What are grand challenges? Grand challenges can be a compelling mechanism to accelerate progress on climate and nature solutions, including in areas where AI may play an impactful role. Grand challenges are a type of strategic innovation framework characterized by the mobilization of significant funding, attention, and resources towards specific, bold objectives with the aim of driving large-scale collaboration and major breakthroughs with respect to these objectives. Right? So you have to design them properly, and especially when something like National Science Foundation or the European Union funding call asks for grand challenges, big teams, there is often a limitation on the funding itself, especially if you build a big team, everybody ends up with a small amount. So you have to be supremely good at designing something that is so synergistic that the funding works very well for everybody. Sorry, I'm trying to track a call here, so because I'm supposed to do an interview in New York. I'm sitting in India, and there is a lot of tag going on. The reporter says now, and I say 5 minutes later, oh, I didn't see it. And you understand. Anyway, so the unique role of grand challenges, then the grand challenges differ from other funding instruments such as incentive prizes or hackathons in that they catalyze systemic changes beyond the immediate solutions they generate, laying the groundwork for long-term impact, so-called transformational, but not quite. Past initiatives have driven a diverse set of systemic changes, such as accelerating innovation ecosystems, creating market incentives, enabling large-scale capacity building, and shaping policy frameworks. For example, the DARPA Grand Challenge on autonomous vehicles not only accelerated the development of autonomous driving technologies, but also mobilize the research and deployment ecosystems, laying the groundwork for large-scale follow-on research and commercial ventures. Of course, deciding which types of systemic changes are important provides insights into the intrinsic parameters that need to be defined during a grand challenges design. Notably, objectives, funding amounts, and technology readiness levels. You cannot propose something if it cannot be implemented even with the funding. So technology readiness level is very critical. We'll see that this report defines some other readiness levels that are related to AI and ML as well. We identify 7 different archetypes of grand challenges supporting different theories of changes with respect to direct outcomes and broader systemic impacts, and characterize the funding amounts and TRLs associated with each archetype as guidance for future grand challenge designs. We'll see some figures. So they look at trends in past and ongoing initiatives in AI for climate and nature, which I'll skip because we already looked at them in the last report. Right? So what are the levers for impact then? Grand challenges differ from others, as we already said. So here, resilience rooted grand challenges. So technology readiness level is shown here, required funding is shown here. So foster grassroots social innovation targeting local community needs. So global resilience is an addition or a sum of resilience at community levels, neighborhood levels, and so on. Everybody has to be resilient, and the system is only as resilient as the weakest link in the system. Okay, scaling up, enable industries transformation for large-scale deployment and adoption. TRL level is high at 7 to 9. Funding is estimated at 10 to $50 million. I won't read all the details, but here, discover and disseminate, innovation forge, societal shifts, policy, nexus network, and so on. And here is a figure associated with this, and you can see market incentives, professional training, supportive policy framework, access, inclusion, and justice, community engagement and empowerment, research, innovation ecosystems, implementation and scaling, and finally market dynamics and consumer behavior. Each one has items within that, but everything should add up to climate and nature outcomes, with artificial intelligence being designed, co-designed to make advancement in these. So under professional training, for example, you need lifelong learning program, resource allocation, capacity building, and supportive policy framework. You need international cooperation, policy and regulation, and so on. Okay, so the summary of recommendations, to jump ahead, problem choice is very critical, and there are some recommendations here. Infrastructure, support, and resources. What accompanying infrastructure, support, and resources are necessary to unlock impact during and after Grand Challenge? Here, facilitate pre-challenge training across different skill sets in AI and the relevant application areas, so your technology readiness level as well as other readiness levels that the report defines, we'll look at in a minute, are all ready to go for implementing. So implement a mentorship program, peer-to-peer exchange, and so on. Project teams, what's the best structure and composition for participating teams? How many teams should there be? Funding, how much funding is needed? And what are the supporting infrastructure? Even if you give money, technology readiness level and infrastructure is not there, then it's not going to happen. Stages and project evaluation. That's monitoring, evaluation, reporting are always critical, right? Deliverable type and intellectual property. What types of solutions should be sought and how will those solutions be managed? Success. How should the success of the overall program be evaluated? Evaluation is very critical to make sure you are on the right track, you are effective, efficient, and on target, right? Diversity and equity. What holds back diversity, equity, and meaningful community impact in practice, and how can these barriers be overcome? So, jumping ahead again, what's different about grand challenges in AI for climate and nature? The focus on climate and nature comes with some features that distinguish these initiatives from other grand challenges. Comparing grand challenges in AI for climate and nature to grand challenges focusing on AI more broadly, we highlight several key differences. Again, I won't read the details, but AI as a means and not an end in itself. It's a tool. It's a means to accomplish the goals that we looked at in terms of monitoring, ecosystem, freshwater, biodiversity, equity, justice, all these good things. The main objective of AI for climate and nature challenges is to make progress in addressing climate change and protecting nature. This makes AI innovation a vehicle to achieving this objective, not a goal in and of itself. So it's not only a software, right? It's actually a tool that talks to you, wants to improve itself, and constantly get better at helping you with your goal. That's what AI is supposed to be all about. What's the readiness framework? So other than technology readiness level, they define machine learning technology readiness level, Adoption readiness level. So despite the technology being mature and deployment ready, technological development may still fail due to issues with adoption and integration into existing systems. Socio-technical transitions are very tricky. Just because a great solution is available doesn't mean it will immediately penetrate into communities, markets, governments, policies, regulations, and so on. Market readiness level then, okay, obviously important. And there is a societal readiness level, as I mentioned, with socio-technical transitions. Instead of viewing different axes of readiness separately, integrated frameworks such as socio-technical readiness levels aim to fundamentally interleave considerations of technology readiness, adoption, market readiness, community acceptance, and ethical considerations within one framework. Levels range from early stage technology development alongside initial identification of potential societal uses and risks to validation of medium stage technologies alongside users and community groups, to technology deployment alongside mechanisms for continuous monitoring and improvement of societal outcomes and reduction in risks. So risk mapping is very critical. Measuring climate and nature impact. So you need to have monitoring, evaluation, and impacts of what you are doing. Technological and socio-technical readiness impact. Unlike many AI challenges that are focused solely on advancing technology readiness levels, applications in the climate and nature space may sometimes span several TRLs or have a stronger focus on alleviating bottlenecks to deployment for solutions that are already in upper TRLs and they are just not implemented yet because of all these socio-technical readiness levels and so on. Ambitious time frame and global scope is always important for climate and nature are intrinsically global problems. Okay, for example, monsoon is being affected by Middle East warming and Mediterranean warming and all the tropical oceans pole to pole. So India can do all it wants for protecting its nature, people, properties, lives, agriculture, energy, etc., food security, and so on. But unless whatever we do has global scope, we will not be helped, right? So AI community culture needs to also be a focus. So AI for climate and nature space draws many benefits from the AI community. So AI community often can be focused on just techniques, increasing speed, efficiency, computational costs, and so on. But how do we make sure that it is working for nature and climate as well? Not method agnostic. So AI is very problem specific sometimes. The space of AI for climate and nature is not method agnostic, as it specifically seeks to foster climate and nature approaches that make use of AI. So you have to sometimes redefine the problem to be able to be solved with AI. The usefulness and feasibility of the AI application is front and center. As such, grand challenges in AI for climate and nature should be picked such that AI is likely to be useful. This makes AI specific considerations such as the data ecosystem or maturity of specific AI methods that would be applicable a relevant consideration when selecting between different climate and nature areas for the grand challenge. Okay, so many details. Data is central. Data, and when you say global scope, you have international boundaries to worry about and all kinds of geopolitical considerations, economic competitions, and so on. So sharing data, being open about sharing data becomes very critical, and not just collecting data. Every country may collect data, but if it's not shared, then you cannot have global scope, right? So that's important. What are the levers for impact? Levers for impact and systemic changes exhibited by grand challenges and open innovation initiatives in our sample. So the sample is not exhaustive. So here is a lever for impact, the components and examples. I won't go through the details. It's a very nice detailed table that you can look up. Climate and nature outcomes. So climate change mitigation, adaptation, ecosystem services, biodiversity, climate climate equity, climate justice, and environmental justice. So here are the examples. We already looked at X Prize for carbon removal, AI for climate resilience in rural areas, and NASA's harmful algal bloom ML challenge, and so on. AI advancement. Improvement on diverse performance, efficient and accessible approaches, responsible and ethical AI framework, and jump to research. You have interdisciplinarity and R&D activities, innovation ecosystems, support for innovation ecosystems, and open data. Open data. AI and ML are nothing without data. Implementation and scaling. So scaling-oriented funding. So it may be a grand challenge, but if it doesn't scale up, then or produce transferable solutions, then it may not meet the demands of a grand challenge funding. Market dynamics and consumer behavior, adoption of new technologies, consumer-driven demand pull, and market incentives, of course, and capacity building with resource allocation, lifelong learning programs, and professional training. There are already many such examples that I'm not reading, but you should. Community engagement and empowerment, so public education and awareness, engaging local communities, community data empowerment, and then next up is access, inclusion, and justice. So improve access, inclusion in decision making. Policy and regulations, supportive policy framework, international cooperation. There are frameworks already working like UN Climate Change's EI Initiative, Clean Energy Challenge, EIT, Technology, and so on. What are the archetypes of grand challenges then? Okay, and it is about discovering and disseminating, so ideation, engine, and knowledge disseminator. Just the terminologies are very nice, right? So what is happening here? Grand challenge archetypes and their associated funding amounts, choices of solution, technological readiness levels, objectives and unique levers for impact, so climate and nature outcomes and AI advancements are shared levers for impact across all grand challenges in AI for climate and nature and are therefore omitted in the table below. Each archetype represents a different theory of change for the grand challenge. So again, I won't read all the details, but theory of change, that's about laying foundations of research and disseminating knowledge. Characteristics in terms of TRL levels and funding. Objectives, of course, levers of impact, research, innovation, ecosystem, and capacity building. Many examples. And the innovation forge, again, innovator, builder, and ecosystem incubator. Theory of change, characteristics, objectives, levers of impact, and examples. So MIT Climate Grand Challenge, AI for Materials Discovery Grand Challenge, Societal Shifts, Impact Amplifier, and Community Transformer. Everything has to go out of the lab or academic setting or whatever the setting is, co-development with stakeholders, and then has to be amplified immediately for achieving the global scope that we mentioned. Again, theory of change, characteristics, objectives, levers of impact, and examples have to be considered for societal shift here. For example, theory of change requires promote market-ready solutions with community-level impact. So theory of change is always associated. Here in government's policy influencer and knowledge disseminator, for example, theory of change requires that we shape public policy and governance via actionable insights. For Nexus Network Ecosystem Creator Incubator, we need to create robust platforms for coordination and capacity building. For resilience-rooted community catalyst, we need to foster grassroots social innovation targeting local community needs. Scaling up market catalyst and policy influencer will need us to enable industry transformation for large-scale deployment and adoption. Okay, so how long am I here? This will not be finished in one podcast for sure. So 19 minutes, so let me go for a few more minutes. This is a real-time adjustment. It is not the best strategy, but I don't plan so well, so I do it on the fly. What are the anatomies of a grand challenge? Based on our analysis of grand challenges and open innovation initiatives in AI and AI for climate and nature, this section details the major components of a grand challenge as well as key questions that need to be addressed when designing these components across multiple categories, namely organizing entities, problem choice, initiative planning, outreach and target audience, challenge design, supporting aspects, and learning and adaptation mechanisms. We provide further details and insights on a number of questions below. Again, I won't read all of them. So under problem choice, you have, is the problem a critical gap to achieving climate and nature goals, and can it be meaningfully addressed using AI? And then there are other questions. Initiative planning, goal, target, problem statement. How can the problem statement be defined in such a way to align with the focus area identified, attract the right participants, and guide the challenge's strategic objective? Okay, outreach and target audience. Challenge design modality. Should the challenge be online, in person, or both in a hybrid sense, right? And supporting aspects, data sources, support resources, IP management, DEI and ethics, diversity, equity and inclusiveness, post-challenges plans. This is critical. Are there any follow-on plans for development, implementation or deployment to support participants' solutions and their positions within the ecosystem as a whole? So you need to give ownership and not just go in, do something and get out and leave nobody in charge as a post-challenge plan, right? So sustainability of these solutions is always important in terms of post-challenge plans, okay? Finally here, post-challenge plans in terms of feedback mechanisms and adjustment strategies. So there are other sections which also give such details and then recommendations. So let's just read the recommendations for the problem for this part, and they are recommendations: frame grand challenge goals based on readiness levels, ensure AI is indeed well suited for the problem, prioritize areas with existing interests from complementary stakeholder communities, deprioritize areas with disproportionately high funding and media attention. Don't jump into a bandwagon just because media is highlighting it. Tipping points always comes to mind for me because it's hyped a lot by media and some groups in Europe. Do not attempt to cover all areas equally. You need to prioritize and very effectively. It may depend on the AI readiness level, data availability, technological readiness level, and so on. Other sections looked at infrastructure, support, and resources. So there is a list of recommendations for that. Project teams. What is the best structure and composition for participating teams? How many teams should there be? Set of recommendations come for that. Funding, of course. Stages and project evaluation. How should the challenge be designed with regards to timing, stages, and project evaluation? Nice recommendations there as well. Deliverable type and intellectual property. What types of solutions should be sought, and how will those solutions be managed? Nice set of recommendations you can read up. Success. How should the success of the overall program be evaluated? So nice recommendations there as well. And finally, diversity and equity. What holds back diversity and equity and meaningful community impact in practice, and how can those barriers be overcome? So I will read the conclusions leisurely instead of rushing it here because we are already about 23.5 minutes here, and this is background, so we should leave it alone and then come back and discuss the conclusions of this report on grand challenges in AI for Grand Challenge initiatives, in AI for climate and nature. I skipped a lot of details. It's a very nice long report, and I picked the most salient points based on my own subjective criteria. So you can go back and read the original report if you want more details. Okay, let's wrap up with conclusion in the next podcast.